Welcome to Creative Arts Apothecary. I am your host, Marina Tselner, and I am so excited to introduce my guest, Robert Jackman.
Author Robert Jackman is a board-certified psychotherapist who has helped many people on their healing path for more than 20 years. In addition to his private practice, he has taught master's levels classes, led outpatient groups in hospitals, given lectures on mindfulness, hypnotherapy, codependency, and the role of spirituality in healing, and participated in numerous weekend retreats with Victories for Men. He brings a sense of positive psychology to his work, looking for the strengths within each person and identifying those areas that carry a false sense of self. Robert is also a Reiki master who uses energy psychology in his practice and considers himself a codependent in recovery, always working on boundary setting, discernment, and connecting with his authentic self. Robert, welcome.
Robert, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm excited about our conversation.
Same here. It's a real pleasure to speak with you today. If I may say so, I entered this conversation rather naively, as a visual artist, my whole life, and then not kind of, but very much so, my personal experience went deeper when I combined visual arts with healing.
Right.
In these fantastic communities, we talk about the inner child a lot, and it's so intuitive. I'm like, yes, I have one, and people respond. People from the workshops, I've had people call me, people email me. They're like, my inner child needs this. I was like, wait a second, let's do some more research about that. Wouldn't that be fun? So that's how I found your work. It's a thing. It's a real field. And can you tell us more about that, please?
I sure can. And I love that you're referencing the inner child, and that folks that you're working with, they're also bringing up the concept of the inner child. So that was really developed in the 1930s by Carl Jung. He was one of the first pioneers talking and referencing the inner child. And of course, since then, so many thought leaders have built on top of that topic and expanded it. And I was very fortunate in my middle 20s to begin working with a therapist who was very skilled in inner child work. And he took me through my own healing with this modality. And it really changed how I was looking at myself and I was looking at the world. And through that work, I was understanding my codependent, or as I call them, my wounded patterns that I was using, as well as my then lack of boundary setting. And all of those things were really impacting how my inner child was feeling and what was going on with that part of me. And so since then, I've gone on to, do workshops and retreats and more therapy as far as understanding my own inner child wounding and that I had. And I've since healed that part of me. And that really was the impetus for me to create my books on inner child healing, to really help others do that same kind of deep work that I did. So my message always is, everything that I'm asking you to do, I've done.
Beautiful. That makes it very relatable. Totally.
Yeah.
That's right here. Here we are.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
Definitely excited to hear more about the work that you're doing. Can you share a bit about your personal journey? I know you write about it in your book, but can you share with us?
I sure can.
All right.
So my personal journey was, I grew up in a very loving household. But like so many folks, we had our own dysfunctions in that household. And as a boy, I was trying to figure out how to navigate this. So at times, my mom and dad were very loving and connected, but other times they would argue, like most parents do. And I was a very empathic child, so I was picking up a lot of stuff emotionally, and I think psychically. And so it was really overwhelming to me. And so I developed all these coping strategies, which are, as I refer to them, the wounded tools to sort of navigate this. So I became shut down, became trying to be the perfect little boy, do everything right. And I was also trying to fix this wounded relationship within the family household. So I put a lot of pressure on myself as a little boy to try to fix this stuff. And of course, as I grew up and went into my therapy, I was understanding how hard I was working to try to make this family system functional, and how I developed all these wounded tools as a way to try to create some emotional safety for myself. And so that really is the big key. And I tell folks that I work with that we come upon our wounding very honestly, because, you know, as kids, it's like no one's teaching us this stuff. We're sort of learning it using our own personalities and intelligence and intuitive nature as far as how to navigate this. And so the first part of the book really begins by acknowledging, addressing these wounded tools. And from that, we learn that that really is the language of the wounded inner child.
And can you talk a little bit more about the role that this wounded inner child can play in our life?
Oh, very much. So for me, I played the role of the peacemaker, the caretaker, the fixer, the rescuer. So that's really a lot of times how the wounded inner child is showing up, as well as things about like avoiding conflict or shutting down or isolating, withdrawing. So that's how, as an adult, let's say we're in a situation, and the trigger in the adult situation is similar enough to what happened in childhood. Well, immediately that wounded inner child steps in front of the adult self, and it is immediately like on guard. And it's like, okay, what do I need to do here? Because the wounded inner child is like looking for those situations that are coming up, because that's what the inner child did in childhood and is doing in adulthood, protecting us. So it's a big protector piece that's showing up. And the inner child then is like either getting really loud and big, yelling, throwing a tantrum, or shutting down, withdrawing, isolating, whatever that wounded response is. And then later, most often later, the adult self comes back and they're like, why did I do that? Why did I react that way? Why was I so big? Or why did I get so small? And it's because that's the wounded inner child. That's the response of the wounded inner child. And so the key to healing this part is building and promoting strong boundaries within ourselves and with others. So that's the tipping point for healing. And that's how the inner child will heal that wounding, and then know that the adult self is going to protect all of us. So an example would be a trigger happens, and in the past, the inner child is like, okay, I'm ready to come and like fight for all of us and defend us in whatever way. But now the adult self brings the healed boundary forward and says, no, I got this. I know I have the tools now that are functional, and I can begin to use those to protect all of us. And so the boundary would be, no, I don't like how you talk to me that way. That feels really hurtful. So that would be an example of a boundary. Well, that language is what we didn't have in childhood. Mm-hmm. And so when we get that language in adulthood, then the inner child the wounded inner child is like, oh, I don't have to do that. The adult self is now protecting us. And that's really how the healing happens. I know I'm making it sound really simple, but it's a lot of work. But that really is, what it is in a nutshell. And you referenced the book, which I appreciate, and then I also have the workbook. And so the workbook has all the exercises that are in the book. They're in the workbook. Plus, I have more wrapped around there to really help people heal. So that's really always been my goal with my work, is to get it out there and to help as many people as I can.
Hmm. amazing, really. And so in writing, you do make it sound easy, but it's a lot thanks to the way that you break it down into easy steps that you can take. So it's a big journey. But if you
Great.
follow these steps, it feels very, very doable and very clear to understand. And I really appreciate that it sort of addresses all my whole experience. It doesn't not just the some of us have incredibly traumatic experiences in our childhood, and some of us less so.
Mhm.
But how you're saying is this is the human experience. No shame, no blame.
No,
This is how we grow up to be our most authentic selves, and I really appreciate that. If it's like it, do I have permission to take to heal my inner child? Like, is my inner child lost enough? Is it too lost? So this is for everyone.
it's,
This is for all
that's
of us.
true. That's true. It really is for every person. I'll have people say, "Oh, well, my childhood wasn't that bad. I didn't have abuse. I didn't have," it's like, and I respect that, and I'm glad that their childhood wasn't bad. But the reality is that most of us have picked up some of these impulsive response tools that we've brought into our adult life that are getting activated or triggered, and then we're kind of bringing them forward. And so it's about just recognizing that and fine tuning that. Um, in my story, my dad, who was a lovely man and who my parents really loved me very much, but he would drink and rage, and that was overwhelming to me. And then my mom would, at times enable that behavior and stuff. So I didn't learn really good boundaries growing up. And so that was a big part of my work as in my own therapy. And that's why I make such a big point of it in the books as well.
Can you tell us what a few things or something that's been the most surprising working in the way that you do?
That's a good question. I think what's really surprising, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense, is that the same sort of patterns and themes keep on coming up in so many of our lives. So with all the folks that I've worked with, and with I have over 32,000 readers all over the world, and I will hear from them, and they'll tell me all of these similar stories of how as a child they didn't understand what was happening, and that they feel that my books are helping to make sense of was happening. And so it just tells me that we're all really trying our best. And as children, there's an expression that children are great observers but lousy interpreters. And so as children, we were taking it all in, but we were interpreting or trying to make sense of our world just based on what we knew, what we understood. I was working with someone the other day, and they told me that their sibling went away to have an operation, and the parents didn't tell the kids anything what was happening. They weren't like preparing the whole family for this situation that was going on. And so their sibling came home after the operation with an eye patch. And so the other siblings were like, "Oh, what happened here?" And mom and dad never explained anything. And so the kids are observing this. Well, the other kids in the family said, "Oh, well, it must be TV. TV caused him he had to have that operation. Now he has the eye, so TV caused it." So it shows, how innocently and honestly we come about these misperceptions.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. And just
Yeah.
uh, patterns, talking about patterns is common in our creative arts and healing circles. And for me personally in my own journey, and there's a lot of, I gotta break this pattern, I gotta get rid of this pattern, I gotta be rid of it forever. And it was so interesting. We were talking earlier, and you write about this, and like the patterns they're not the bad guys. We don't need to
No.
fear them or hate them. We can learn from them, right?
We can learn from them through observing them. And so that's really what this work helps us do, is recognizing the patterns And I just made a short video for my YouTube channel talking about this, how if you look at, so I have people do a timeline of from birth to 20 to sort of help identify things that might have come up. And you'll start to see when you do the timeline some patterns like, oh, I was always I always felt I was second place, or I was always feeling like I was left out or whatever. And so those patterns, that's the wounded pattern that keeps on showing up, that then impacts our view of ourselves, which then creates this false narrative that then we're walking with. So, I'm working with someone right now I'm always second place. It always happens, and so that is her kind of badge that she wears, like second place. And of course, that's a falsehood, but it was imprinted so strongly in childhood. So as a clinician, I'm able to sort of stand back and see this bigger picture when I'm working with people. But that's what I'm trying to help the reader do, is to look back and see the bigger picture, see these patterns. Like you said, the patterns aren't the enemy. The patterns are just the symptom. They're what's left over after you go through all of these experiences.
So powerful, especially the timeline work. It's really powerful. So I'm asking our speakers to share a few techniques or some processes, and we spoke about this earlier. You have a few techniques that you would like to share with us. Yes.
I do. So one of the really powerful techniques that I talk about in my books and in my work is symbolic letter writing. And so it's similar to journaling, but for myself, I never really connected with the process of journaling and kind of creating this diary. That just didn't feel right to me. And so I developed this technique called symbolic letter writing. I don't think I invented it, but I just named it that. And it is where you would identify a person or a situation, and then you're writing "Dear so and so," and you're just stream of consciousness writing all of this stuff out, where you're saying how you feel, what's going on, why this is hurting you, and you're just fast and furious writing, writing, writing. So it's this energetic exchange that you're doing. You're getting that energy out of you. And then once you've done that, then go back and read it, but then tear it up or burn it, symbolically burn it. Don't keep it. It's not meant as a diary. It's meant as a ephemeral experience in the moment. I just did one of these last weekend for myself, and it's really kind of magical how it frees up some real estate inside of us that we can then fill with more light and love than having this sort of heavy, dense energy inside of us. So the symbolic letter writing is one thing. The second process that I teach, in 2014, a Russian psychologist developed this technique called Neurographic Art. And I made one for our presentation today. So if you look at this, all it is doodling, right? So it's just like squiggly lines on the page, but then you see where the intersections are, where the sharp, like more angled parts are. I've curved in those places. And so the curves represent the smoothing out, or the kind of just being the just sort of gentleness bringing into that space instead of the sharp angles. And when we do that smoothing out, there is this kind of very natural feeling of letting go, of being a little gentler, being a little bit more tender with yourself. And it really is a magical process. You can take this work further by filling in more of the spaces and just, letting yourself fully express. But I like it. It's really simple, and it's simple to teach, and you can use different colors. And what I also like is, you probably heard of the Chinese philosophy of feng shui and qi. And so this also, I believe, taps into that. because by curving out in feng shui doesn't like sharp angles, just like this. And so in feng shui, we might put a plant in the corner to smooth out that sharp angle of the corner. It's the same thing here. And so it's a subconscious healing. So it's happening on many levels within us. So that's another good process. And then the third one I wanted to talk about today is making grids, crystal grids. So I don't know if your viewers know about this, but you can take rocks or crystals and create patterns with them. So you've probably heard of mandalas. So it's like building a mandala with rocks or crystals as you sort of fan out. So it could be circles, it could be diamond shapes, and just really allow yourself to kind of play with it, where you're moving around the stones and crystals and you're beginning to feel how that shape, how that design feels. So that's really the key part of grid work is how does it feel? What's going on? And I made one this morning for my sister, and I put that together, and it's fun. It's very simple to do. I'm a Reiki master, so I'm very plugged into energy, and so that helps me. That's one of my things that I do that really helps to sort of help me process things in my life.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those.
I think, for me, because growing up, I was very focused on the household and my mom and dad and making everything better. I feel like I had to grow up pretty fast. And the clinical term today is like I became parentified at a young age. And so I became very plugged into the emotional functioning of the household. And because of that, my play, I had to set aside. And so as an adult, I'm giving myself more permission to play. And so all those things that I was just telling you about, that's my play. So that's how I do that as an adult. And if I screw up one of the things, it's like, okay, I'm just going to go with it. And, it's perfectly imperfect. And I'm just going to have fun with it. And so it's not about shame, blame, or, criticism. I think, we had talked earlier about how do people get this idea of their art needs to be perfect. And a lot of times it comes from like, a kid running up to mom or dad saying, "Oh, look what I made." And mom or dad's like, "Oh, that's really nice. But do you think you could like color that in a little bit more and make that a little bit better?" And so that small comment from mom or dad then begins to imprint that, oh, this wasn't good enough, or I need to be better. So that a lot of times that's, these small ways, it's how children get messages that they're less than or they're not good enough and they need to be better.
It feels good. It feels good to have the permission to play as a mode for being your best self, not to like, I mean, yes, rest and take time off, but really as a process to break through those blocks. We have writer's block or painter's
Right.
block or whatever it is, that pressure. And then the way that you describe, okay, this technique didn't speak to me, but this one I was writing fast and furious. There's a way. So we get to keep looking, or so we can reinterpret. We don't get
Mm-hmm.
healing is not for me. It doesn't speak to me. Instead, you're like, well, maybe this technique, or maybe
That's
this technique. That's
exactly
great.
right. And that's, as a clinician, that's exactly what I do with someone that I'm working with. So I'll use the modality that I think is going to work best for them. And if they're not responding, then we move on to something else. And it's the same thing with processing our feelings, because I'll say like the symbolic letter writing, it's a great technique, but it's not a once and done sort of thing. And it's not a magic pill. So it's like we have to really give ourselves that permission to look at a broad palette of modalities to bring in, to let ourselves explore ourselves and to, again, move that energy. So think about all healing is transforming energy that's inside of us. when we acknowledge it, when we name it, we can claim it, we can own it, we can move on and heal it. So that's just a big part of this whole work.
Beautiful. Transforming energy that's inside of us. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of
Yeah.
it. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you have a gift for the audience. Can you tell us about that,
I
please?
do. So if your viewers would like, they can go to my website, theartofpracticalwisdom.com, and send me an email through that website. And then I have a short paper on boundary setting. So again, going back to our earlier discussion, that's why I think boundaries are so important. I just describe what boundaries are, how to use them. It's short, so I don't want people to think I'm like they're going to be getting a book back, but it's just some good reminders as well as some practical messages on boundary setting. And so just write to me, theartofpracticalwisdom.com, and they can also find more of my videos on my YouTube channel, The Art of Practical Wisdom. And I'm trying to put up more things on that YouTube channel. I also have another book. So I have the Healing Your Lost Inner Child book, and then I have Healing Your Wounded Relationship. And so this book goes into basically when the inner child grows up. And so this book is, we take all of our wounding from childhood and we subconsciously attract someone into our life to play out this wounding. So someone who has more of a victim narrative, they're like, oh, I need someone to rescue me. So they find a rescuer. And conversely, the person who grew up with being the hero rescuer, they're looking for the codependent who needs help. So I call those pairings synergistic wounding because there's a synergy that's happening between the two. And so this book, like the first book, has exercises, has a process to take, especially for couples communication, that helps to couples really stop cycles and then start again. So I call it the STAR reset, stop, think, act, reset, and repair the relationship. And so that's the process that's in that book.
So good. So good. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to discover your work, and I can't wait to check out the sequel. It's really been a great pleasure speaking with you. So
I've
thank you
really
very much.
enjoyed this.
Thank you. And to our audience, remember to stay creative. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.